Okay, so, you can't really miss all the buzz around women's basketball right now.
Definitely.
It feels like something big is happening.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
so exciting, and it brings up this question that I feel like everyone is asking.
Right.
Is women's basketball finally going to get the recognition that it deserves?
Totally.
That's exactly what we're going to look at today in this deep dive.
Love it.
We're going to unpack the reasons behind this massive surge in popularity
Right.
and look closely at this whole conversation about respect that's been happening around the sport.
For sure. It feels like such a crucial moment for women's basketball. We're
Yeah.
seeing these incredible achievements and this increasing visibility. But to understand what's going on, we really need to look at the whole journey of the sport and how we define deserved recognition. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah, so for this deep dive, we have a few key areas we want to hit first. We're going to look at the insane growth in viewership and how the star power of these players is driving it. Then we'll look at some historical factors that have led to this respect gap. Like, why hasn't the women's game gotten the same level of acknowledgement as the men's game historically?
Yeah.
From there, we'll look at all the signs that things are starting to change.
Total.
And finally, we'll discuss what needs to happen to make that recognition permanent and, fully realized.
Yeah, I love that.
So our mission today is pretty simple. We want to clearly understand this pivotal moment in women's basketball and understand this whole conversation about where it deserves to be in the world of sports.
Definitely.
All right, so let's get into it. Let's start by looking at just how much this sport is growing right now.
Well, one thing that really stands out to me is just the massive amount of growth that we've seen recently.
Yeah.
The fact that the 2023 NCAA Women's Championship game had over 9.9 million viewers. That's not just a little jump, that's a record.
Wow.
It shows that a lot more people are watching.
It's a huge number. And it's not just a one-time thing either. We're seeing these incredible athletes becoming household names.
Yeah.
Like in college basketball, Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Paige Buchers.
Yeah.
Even if you aren't someone who's glued to the TV watching every college game, you've probably heard these names.
For sure.
They're really breaking through.
Yeah. And that level of name recognition is huge.
Yeah.
It means they're not just talented players anymore. They're part of a larger cultural conversation.
Right.
And then in the WNBA, you have big names like Aja Wilson, Brianna Stewart, and Sabrina Ionescu, who's so exciting to watch.
Yeah.
They're all pushing the level of play higher and getting more and more fans interested in the game.
It's a real powerhouse of talent. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
And this leads to a big question.
Right.
If you look at these numbers, the skill, the growing excitement, why hasn't women's basketball historically, and maybe even still today, gotten the same recognition and acknowledgement as the men's game?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
It makes us think about this respect gap and why it exists.
Yep.
One clear example of this undervaluation that your source talks about is the big difference in pay between WNBA players and NBA players.
Yeah,
That difference in salary shows how differently the two leagues have been valued.
absolutely. It's a really clear contrast.
Yeah.
And it's not even just about the salaries, is it?
No, definitely not.
Think about how the media covers the sport.
Right.
Your source mentions that things are getting better, but the coverage still isn't equal.
That's true.
Like, how often do you actually see highlights from WNBA games on those big sports shows compared to the NBA?
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's way less common.
It is, and that lack of media attention can create a kind of cycle.
What do you mean?
Well, less coverage means less visibility for the sport.
Right.
And that can end up affecting how much fans engage with it overall.
That makes sense.
Your source even talks about how a dunk in the NBA can go viral super fast.
Well, yeah.
But then you have these equally impressive plays in the WNBA, like a no-look pass or a game-winning shot, and they don't get nearly as much attention.
That's so true. You see these moments of amazing athleticism and skill, but they don't always break through to the wider sports world in the same way.
Exact.
And your source starts to point to some of the reasons for this gap.
Yeah.
Like, there's probably some ingrained bias at play, and there's definitely been a history of less consistent investment in the women's game compared to the men's.
Right. Those are definitely key factors to consider.
Yeah.
The source also includes some perspectives from fans, which I think are really interesting.
Okay, what do they say?
Well, one fan said that more people just need to tune in to really see how good the game is,
Yeah.
which I think highlights the potential for growth just by getting the sport more exposure.
Right. Like, the idea is if people actually watched They would be hooked by the skill and the excitement.
Exactly. And another fan called it a respect issue.
Interesting.
And they connected it to how the league and its players are marketed and presented to the public.
That's a good point.
It's not just about the quality of the game. It's about the stories that are told about it, how much it's seen in the media, and how much investment goes into promoting and developing it.
Right.
But, your source also points out that it's not all bad news, right?
Definitely not. And this is where things start to get really interesting.
Yeah.
Because there are some clear signs that we might be seeing a real shift happening.
For sure.
What's encouraging is that we're seeing real evidence of this change.
Right.
The fact that huge brands like Nike and Google are investing more and more.
Yeah.
That's not just symbolic. It shows that they're starting to see the market potential and the growing appeal of women's basketball.
Yeah.
Right? That kind of financial backing can make a huge difference across the board.
Totally.
And then there's social media.
Oh, yeah. That's huge.
It's giving players a way to connect directly with their fans,
For sure.
to build their own brands and kind of bypass the traditional media outlets.
Right, and that direct connection. It builds a stronger bond between the players and the fans, which can lead to more sustained interest in the sport.
Makes sense.
And looking ahead, the excitement building up for the 2024 Paris Olympics is another thing that could drive more interest.
Oh, for sure.
The success of the USA women's team on the international stage often leads to more visibility and interest back home.
Absolutely. Those big global competitions can really capture a huge audience.
Yeah.
And maybe the most important thing that your source brings up
Yeah.
is the impact these players are having on the next generation.
For sure.
Young girls see athletes like Clark and Ionescu achieving these amazing things.
Yeah.
And it makes the dream of playing professionally seem so much more achievable.
That role model effect is so powerful.
Yeah.
Seeing someone who looks like you achieving great things can really change a young person's dreams and what they believe is possible.
It's true. So we have all these things coming together.
Yeah.
Increased visibility, growing financial support, inspiring role models.
Totally.
It's all pointing towards positive momentum.
Definitely.
But the big question is, what needs to happen from here?
Yeah.
What needs to happen to really lock in this progress and close that respect gap for good?
That's the question.
Your source highlights a few areas for future development,
Okay. What are they?
and they're all really important. The first one is continued financial investment at every level.
Right. I mean, this isn't just about higher salaries for the players,
Yeah,
although that's a huge part of it.
for sure.
It's also about investing in better facilities, creating strong marketing campaigns to reach a wider audience, and making the infrastructure of the league and the sport stronger at the grassroots level.
Exactly. You can't expect the sport to reach its full potential without that foundation of support and investment.
You can't.
The second area the source talks about is the need for better media coverage.
Totally.
And this raises a point about how we prioritize women's sports in the mainstream media.
Yeah.
We need to see more games in primetime slots,
Yeah.
more highlights alongside the men's games, more in-depth analysis. All of that is so important to help raise the profile of women's basketball in the public eye.
It needs to be seen as just great basketball,
Yeah.
not women's basketball. That gets pushed to the side.
Exactly. And finally,
Yeah.
and maybe this is the most important part, is the growth of fan support.
Totally.
Your source encourages you, the listener, and everyone out there to actively engage with the sport.
All of it.
That active engagement is what keeps any sport going in the long run.
For sure.
Buying tickets, watching the games, talking about it with your friends, engaging on social media.
Yeah.
All of that shows that there is real and growing demand for women's basketball.
It creates that positive cycle.
Yeah.
More fans means more media interest,
Right.
which means more investment.
Yeah.
And all of that elevates the sport even further.
Exactly. And your source makes a really important point.
Okay, what's that?
Respect isn't something you automatically get. It's earned
Yeah.
through dedication and performing at a high level. And there's no doubt that the players in the competition in women's basketball have earned that respect.
They absolutely have the skill, the athleticism, the competitive spirit. It's all there.
Totally.
It's about changing how people see the sport and dealing with those old biases that have led to this inconsistency in how it's recognized.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the stuff you sent us,
Yeah,
I have to ask you, our listener,
right.
what do you think?
Yeah.
We talked about the impressive growth, the amazing talent, the challenges the sport has faced, and the signs that things are getting better.
Yeah.
So what's your assessment? Is women's basketball finally getting the respect it deserves, or is there still a lot of work to do?
That's a huge question for all of us to think about.
Yeah.
The data in the stories definitely suggests that things are moving in the right direction,
Yeah.
but real deep respect, that's part of our culture that often takes a bigger change
Yeah.
in how we see things and what we prioritize as a society.
It's definitely something to think about. And I hope this deep dive has given you some new perspectives on this really important moment for the sport.
Yeah. Maybe it even sparked some ideas or got you thinking about starting a conversation with someone
Right.
and maybe building on what your source is saying.
Yeah.
True respect for women's basketball means seeing it not as an extra event or a second-tier league,
Right.
but as the exciting and important part of the sports world that it really is.
Exactly.
I think that's a great place to end it.
I agree.
Thanks for tuning in.
Of course, this was great.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.
This was good.